Hello, my geometry students. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look a little bit more at circles, but I want to look at area. So we already talked about circumference of a circle and finding arc length, which was a portion of the circumference. We're going to do something really similar today, except instead of talking about the distance around the outside of a circle circumference, we're going to talk about how much it takes to cover the inside of the circle, or the area. And we're going to talk about the area of the whole circle, and then we're going to talk about how to find the area of what's called a sector of the circle, which is just a little section or a little piece, like a piece of pie of the circle. And so that's what a sector is. It's a portion of the area of the circle going from the center. And so I put in parentheses here, you can think of it like a piece of pie. Now, it could be a really huge piece of pie, even more than half the circle, or it could be a really small piece of pie. So it's just coming out from the center, cutting off a portion of the circle. So first off, let's talk about how to find the area of a circle. So area of a circle, area is pi r squared. So wait a second, something doesn't seem right there. Pi r squared, pi are round, aren't they? Oh, good math jokes. That's good stuff, isn't it? But the area is pi times radius squared. And so let's see if we can put that to use. That should be review. We talked about that earlier in the year, and you've probably used that sometime before this year as well. So let's see if we can find the area of a whole circle here. And so the radius on this circle, we've got 12 inches. And so pi times 12 squared is what we've got for the whole area. And so putting this in our formula here, we got pi times 12 squared, or in other words, if I leave it in terms of pi, 12 squared is 144, so this is 144 times pi for the area of that circle. And since we're talking area, that would be square inches. Now, if it said leave your answer in terms of pi, you'd want to do something like that. If you were doing this for some practical use and needed to know how many square inches that is, you'd probably want to get this as a decimal. And so 144 pi comes out to about 452.39 or so square inches using the pi button on the calculator. So there's the area approximately of that circle. So let's talk about what if we didn't want the whole circle. So this is the area of the entire circle. What if we wanted half the area? So basically, if I just like made a diameter across here and shaded in half of this and said find the area of just that half. Well, since it's half of that, it would just be half the area. Or in other words, take half of that. Remember, in math world, when we say of means multiplication. So that times a half, basically. Which would give us half of that, which would give us about 226.19 square inches. So a little more difficult, what if we wanted 117 degrees of the circle? So basically, here's what that would look like. If I came over here, made an angle that was 117 degrees at the center of the circle, and shaded in this portion right here and said, find the area of just that sector of the circle, just that piece. Well, we still want to do the same idea. We want to take a fraction of the area. It's just not as simple of a fraction as 1/2. The fraction that we'd want, think about this for a second. Do you guys see the fraction of the circle we would want? We're using 117 degrees. Now, think about how many degrees total are there if I go full circle around this. We know a full circle is 360 degrees. That means the fraction of the circle we're using is 117 360ths of the circle. So still the exact same problem, just an uglier fraction. Sorry, I didn't want to offend you, fraction, and call you ugly, but not as simple numbers of a fraction. You're still beautiful. So 117 over 360, we want to take that fraction of the area. So the area is 452.39. And so if we take that fraction of, remember of means multiply, and so take that fraction of my entire area. And so I'm going to do our area times 117 over 360, which gives us the area of just that piece of it is about 147.03 square inches. Right, so there's how we find the area of a sector of a circle. And if we wanted to generalize the formula here, I'm going to put that underneath here. Here's basically what we do. Do you notice this central angle is the same as the measure of this arc? And again, we talked about this just the other day. Remember, measure of an arc and length of an arc are two different things. The measure of an arc is a degree measure. The length of an arc is like inches, feet, yards, centimeters, something like that. So here's what we're doing. Basically, this fraction is the measure of the arc that we're after. Just to give it a name, I'm going to call it arc AB. So the measure of the arc in degrees out of 360 times the area of the circle. That's how we find the area of the sector. Now, if you wanted to like simplify this down a little more, the formula for this part is pi r squared. So it's the measure of the arc over 360 times pi r squared in order to get the area of the portion of the circle. So let's see if we can put this to use on another example now. So on this one, I shaded in a little section of this, and we want to find the area of the shaded sector. And so we've got a circle. The radius on this circle is 14 centimeters. The section of the circle we're looking at is 142 degrees. Now I could put this 142 degrees centrally here, or I could put it out here. They would both mean the same thing. They were using 142 degrees of the 360 in the circle. And so if we wanted to find the area of this portion, we're still going to have to find the area of the whole circle first. So that's the very first thing I'm going to do. The area of the entire circle, not the portion, is pi times radius squared. Radius is 14, so we've got pi times 14 squared, or 196 times pi. And I'm going to get this as a decimal this time, which is about 615.75. So that's the area of the entire circle. We're not done yet. We don't want the whole circle. We only want this shaded portion of the circle. And so we have to think, what fraction of this entire area are we using? Well, if the whole circle is 360 degrees and we're using 142 degrees of it, the amount or the fraction of the circle that we're using is 142 360ths. And I know you could maybe simplify that a little bit because they're both even numbers, so it definitely would simplify a little, but we could just leave it like that and it'll still work. And so that fraction of 615.75 would tell us what we want for the area of just that shaded portion. So I'm going to do that 615.75 times 142 over 360. And that tells us that little shaded portion there is about 242.88. Oops, we're in centimeters. 242.88 square centimeters it would take to cover that shaded portion of the circle. And so when we're finding the area of a sector, basically we still want the area of the whole circle, but then we're just taking whatever fraction of the circle we're using of that area. And remember, the fraction of the circle you're using is basically just whatever the measure of the arc or the central angle, remember the same thing, out of 360. That's your fraction of the whole area you're using, so take that fraction of, or in other words, multiply that by the whole area. It'll give you the area of just the sector of the circle.